they didn't come out and they weren't meaning to drag Connor Riley, and certainly they're all close with him. But I thought it was clear that they felt like they've upgraded off an offensive coordinator, at least in the way that it'll benefit Avery Johnson moving forward.
Hello and welcome into another edition of Three Ma. John Kurtz, Derek Young, Cole Manbeck, everybody back together here today. We appreciate you being along for the ride and listening, just like we appreciate our good friends at Holiday Distillery. Ben Holiday Bottled and Bond Bourbon, 360 vodka for the lake. Still got plenty of time to get out there. I know we're on the back half of summer, but that also means you can start getting ready for your tailgate. So grab some Ben Holiday Bottled and Bond Bourbon. Sit out on your porch at the end of a long day and listen to some Three Ma. Sounds like a great plan to me. DY, I got to go ahead and just address this because a lot of times, like your shirt, I can't totally tell, but right, I can see the Sun Devil like poking up. We go to Big 12 Media Days and K-State is picked in the unofficial media poll to win the league. They're picked by the coaches in an unofficial poll by On3's very own Brett McMurphy, your colleague, to win the league. Why are you repping Arizona State? Why would you rep an inferior team in this football conference of ours?
I think Arizona State had a lot of respect and love while we were in Frisco too. I know what the polls, those unofficial polls suggested, the coaches poll, the some of the media and everything like that. I think at Iowa State was in it, but I mean, if you just talk to like the players and coaches, it sounded like there was a lot more appreciation for Arizona State than really what surfaced.
I will tell you this. I did my unofficial player survey, so I talked to like 30 players coming out of my newsletter, by the way, open for business, ofbnews.com to subscribe. But Sam Leavitt ran away with the best quarterback in the league discussion. Ran away with it. So it seems like Sam Leavitt has a lot of respect, but I don't know. Arizona State, I can't remember who actually won the pick to win the league. It was pretty spread out as far as who the players thought would win the league. So, for what it's worth.
Yeah, maybe it's just because I was in my little Kansas State ecosystem where it seemed like they had more respect for Arizona State. Kind of, got after them in Manhattan. So it's understandable. I will say I can.
Yeah.
At the video game, College Football 26, I've been playing it. If it's any indication, Sam Leavitt is really, really good.
Yes, he is. Dude, he's got that dot little superpower or whatever, meaning like he can just drop it in, man. He's really fun to play with, actually. Arizona State is a very fun team to play with. Cole, I haven't
gotten the new game yet, but hopefully we'll hear in the near future. So Arizona State's second most returning production, according to Bill Connolly in College Football and the latest metrics that he put out. So 78% of their offense in terms of production back, 79% defense, brought in some key transfers. So look, they're going to be really good. It's the one team kind of at the top that K-State dodges on the schedule.
Can we, DY, speaking of NCAA, before we get off of that, can we talk about that game that you played with Mason in the hotel room that was Notre Dame and K-State in South Bend?
Yeah, I mean, I can score with Notre Dame, but apparently I can't defend, or at least I can't stop Mason when he's K-State. He scored over 60 points. So
it was like the K-State fans' complete wet dream of a game. You're in South Bend, put 60 on Notre Dame. They were wearing the all-white uniforms. It was just like Dylan Edwards wide open for 50-yard bombs, Avery scrambling and hitting him in the back of the end zone. And then the best part, though, was Cole, Leighton Simmering runs a fake. The fake field goal is actually like much more effective in this game. And so Mason ran it for an extra point, and Leighton Simmering got like a clear path to the end zone and did like the, full on like Dion high step. And then he immediately got in the end zone and started grittying. And it was just hilarious watching Leighton Simmering grittying all over DY as he was scoring in South Bend. So wanted to make sure that story got told there. I had to say that because DY beat me when we played head to head. So
yeah, well, I did score like 40 in the second half, still lost, but
Well, it seems NCAA football has projected K-State's kicker properly. Apparently, if Cub
I was
Patton's
going to say, if we
available.
want to transition that into the kicking conversation, it might be,
Oh, no, that's not a fun conversation right now.
Yeah, way to take it to the to John's nightmare. So
Okay, well, it seems like Cub Patton has an injury of some sort and is not available right now, for just judging by the comments, I suppose. So
the omission, basically, I guess you could probably read into the omission of Cub Patton in any kicking questions that were asked, right? Like he never came up.
yeah.
And then
Well, also, DY, if I could like almost directly quote Chris Kleiman on this here channel and podcast, when you asked him about like, are you happy with where the kicking game is? He said, "Oh, you never are." And I was like, is that true? You never
I
are?
just felt like John dying inside as that answer was ongoing.
he did mention Cub Patton's name with you guys on the show. He just said that he said that he did some really nice things in the spring, but then missed time and has missed time. So, but then the rest of the conversation, and then at the podium and other times, I don't think, based off what you guys have heard and the talk around there, I don't know if the true freshman kicker, for folks who don't know Cub Patton, true freshman kicker who was thought to potentially be on scholarship, thought to be potentially relied upon to be the starting kicker for this next season, with Chris Tennant moving on, is might be hurt. We don't know the details.
Yeah, he's from Lubbock. I think whatever is going on with him, I think that drove them to adding the junior college kicker recently, Luis Rodriguez.
Yeah, I think when you connect the dots there, that happened like a week, 2 weeks before Big 12 media days, and then you start hearing that buzz that Cub Patton may be dinged up, and so that is concerning. I mean, Chris Tennant was their most reliable guy as far as the special teams last year. Like, he was the one thing, if they could get the snap down.
I was going to say, and they still struggled because both long snappers, but by game 7 or 8, got the yips, which everyone's like, well, we have bad long snappers. We might, I don't know. Like that's a different conversation. What I will say is, like, those long snappers had no problems like the first half of the year. So I really do think it was the yips that got them, and then their confidence being completely shot.
I'm looking at Tennant's numbers last year, 17 of 21. He was 6 of 7 from 40 to 49, 1 of 2 from 50 plus. I think we know what that one was. So pretty good year for Chris Tennant.
And I would say, and maybe Cole or you can correct me if I'm wrong, but some of those misses can probably be attributed to the long snapping, because I know he actually did attempt a few that were kind of went haywire due to the snap not being on time or just being inaccurate or incompetent.
Yeah,
I think that absolutely played a part.
Yeah, well, yeah. Look, that'll be a concern. The Big 12.
And the punter wasn't that good that last year. Like, Simon McLaren has to be better.
You just figure in the Big 12 there's going to be a lot of close games. There were a ton of close games across the league last year. The margin of error is very thin. Like, for instance, a team like Utah, much as you can attribute a lot of their problems to the quarterback position, they were 1-5 in one-score games, so they were still pretty close a lot of the time. If you're going to be playing a lot of games like that, obviously having a kicking situation that is up in the air would be very concerning. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, Nate Katzer, we'll see. I don't know what Nate Katzer's track record is like specifically at developing kickers, from his time in the NFL. Last year, Chris Tennant was already, I think, in pretty good shape by the time Katzer. Has Katzer been there 2 years? Let me make sure I give him full credit. Has it just been one? It's just one, right? So it felt like Chris Tennant had kind of turned his career around by that point already. Maybe that's not totally fair. He had a very good season last year. I feel very uneasy about what the kicking situation is going to be.
It's fair. I think the concerns there are valid. It is interesting. Arizona State did win the Big 12 last year, and they had a terrible kicking situation.
They're ranked 120th in special teams.
That's a great point, DY. Thank you for making me feel better. They were like literally they wanted to take like a walk-on tryout in the middle of the year. They might have actually done that. Did they follow through on that? I remember Kenny Dillingham talking about it at one point.
Yeah. I don't know if they ever did it, but
yeah. I mean, they're in Bill Connolly's projections, they're 120th in the country in special teams for the 2025 season. So Yeah. K-State is actually 26, guys, I believe, which feels too high. I don't know if they're getting credit based off historical projections. K-State 26 in special teams. Arizona State actually number 136. And
last year the special teams was bad enough that it contributed to the very, very bad starting field position average as well. When your kicking coverage is not exactly great, you're kicking out of bounds, you're snapping, just a litany of mistakes in that phase. It just has to be better. And to John's point about maybe perhaps being in a lot of close games this year, which seems like it's just kind of happens every year anymore where Kansas State is situated and positioned. But Bill, I think you guys know this, but Bill Connolly, I think, had the 5 most important games of the Big 12 this year, and Kansas State's in 4 of them.
Yeah, well, and I mean, think back to last year. I mentioned, like, hey, we all know what that 50-plus yard kick was for Chris Tennant, but I mean, they're potentially losing the Kansas game, right? Without Chris Tennant coming through with a huge field goal there. So I mean, that's evidence enough. You got to go play that game in Lawrence this year. Now, Kansas may not have as talented of a team this year as they did last year. We'll see, but that's just an example of the type of thing. Margin for error can make a massive difference. And how much different does last year feel if Chris Tennant misses that kick? Right, you're sitting here at 8-4, still won the bowl game 9-4, and you're kind of like, all right, disappointing, but like it, you still hit that 9-win thing. Man, if you're 7-5 and then you lost at home to Kansas to end the streak, I mean, it makes a major difference in how you view last season.
Massive. It also would have made a major difference is if they didn't completely collapse against Houston, because we can dive into this for Big 12 Media Day, like takeaways, but talking to the players and even Chris Kleiman, it sounded like they believe that Houston game, they almost lost that game more than once. Like it contributed to the other losses on the schedule.
I believe one of the players say 3 times. I feel like Avery said
maybe, yeah.
He felt like it turned into like 3 losses.
He even admitted like he had a hard time getting over that loss. So
yeah, that was.
So did I.
Yeah, I mean, as you reflect back on the season, I mean, I guess Cole, to me that was by far like the one that was made you the most angry. Definitely was the one that made you.
And I almost agree with him. Before you answer, Cole, well, one, because of the way you lost that Houston game, you could have won if you just decided not to throw the ball the rest of the game. But 2, like I do think if you just find a way to beat Houston, I do think some of those losses are probably wins later in the year.
Yeah, I mean, remember when we had Matt Wells on, John? Like, he brought up Houston on his own accord about how that game still eats away at them as a coaching staff and how mad they are. So it is clear in that locker room that loss had a significant impact on the season. I mean, K-State went down to Houston. They were 7-1. They win that game like they should have. They were up 2 scores. You're 8-1 coming at home to play an Arizona State team, which we thought was a very winnable game and still was a winnable game, but Arizona State clearly was better than even at that point of the year than I'd probably given them credit for coming into that. But yeah, who knows how that game, if there's just a different mindset. We can't get in the heads of the team, but it just felt like they came out. Arizona State was really good, obviously, but it felt like K-State came out a little flat.
You might still lose that game, but I think you win perhaps some of the others.
Yeah, because you went from controlling your destiny on the season and having the chance at the Big 12 championship to then knowing you needed help the rest of the way in the final 3 games of the season after you lost to Houston. And the way that they lost it was infuriating. And you'd mentioned anger, John. I mean, we don't need to go back and circle the wagons on what happened in that game, but I'm just incredibly frustrated with some of the egregious decision-making that happened in that game. And then you had the snapping error. You had multiple chances to ice the game away. It just a litany of mistakes. The interceptions, obviously, at the end, but you should have never been throwing anyways.
That's what I said. You're up 2 scores in a driving rain, and Avery throws the ball late in the 3rd quarter. I think you're up 2 scores, and Avery throws that interception on his own side of the field.
Yeah, they were backed up inside their 15-yard line, and I think it was like 12 minutes actually left in the 4th quarter, up 19-10.
Houston's not driving the ball at all. They can't move the ball at all, but they just pop off that one long run. It's a touchdown.
Yeah.
I actually would make the case that there was a much better chance K-State would win the Arizona State game than there was the game at Iowa State after the Houston loss.
It's perhaps, I just think the reason why I said that, because I think Arizona State was significantly better than Iowa State, and I think that showed. And I think, John, you kind of learned that even Arizona State said, like, beating K-State in Manhattan is when they were first realized that they were, like, legit.
That was Matt Berry, actually, yeah. So ESPN anchor, who I really like. I think he's really good. He's been the guy hosting a lot of their college football stuff. He does College Football Final. I know is where I tend to see him the most, but he was doing like a speed tour of Radio Row, which was a little frustrating. I got like 5-6 minutes in with him, and I was already getting the wrap it up sign from his ESPN handler. So I just started to get into a great line of questioning about, does the Big 12 get enough love on ESPN? And I got the wrap it up thing. I had to let him go. Even he was kind of like, oh, that's it. Okay. So thank you, ESPN.
Not to go back to Houston real quick, but guys, this will be the last thing I have on that. Think how different it feels. Like 9-4. Okay. Think how different it feels if you go 10-3. Just one game. Houston. I mean, when they won the Big 12 championship in 2022, they were 10-3. After now you lost to Alabama in the Sugar Bowl to finish 10-4, but 10-3 to 9-4, it just feels so much different to me when you look at it on paper.
Yeah, I would agree. Well, they say every year you win one you shouldn't, and you lose one you shouldn't. Just about every team in college football. So you lost Houston, you shouldn't be losing. And no, though Kansas State was the favorite each of the last 2 years, I think they've
Kansas.
I think they've kind of escaped the KU game each of the last 2 years. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, promise to Matt, the Matt Berry thing was not a non sequitur. He did say when I was asking him about Arizona State, so he's an Arizona State grad, which maybe is not totally important here because I think he does a good objective job. But
I didn't even know until he told me, so he does a good job of that. Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, yeah, he's an ASU guy. He graduated like late 90s, I think, from Arizona State. And anyway, when I asked him about, I say that to say he has a little bit of extra insight into ASU, right? So I had asked him about something where he thought they were, if they could defend as champs or something. And I said, hey, I'm a K-State guy. You don't have to tell me twice about how good they are, because they came in and punked K-State, to be honest, in Manhattan. And he said, yeah, it was like Sam Levitt will tell you that was like what really jump-started their season. Like they were just humming along as like having a nice year, but the K-State game is when they were like, oh, like we can do something really special here. And so it was like a Will Lee power boost for you, if you will, like Will Lee shoving Abu Sama. That was K-State shoving Arizona State forward into the end zone on their season that damn near resulted in a playoff win against Texas. So yeah, I don't know if that makes anybody feel better, but K-State really helped out Arizona State a hell of a lot last year is the point.
By the way, in that coaches poll, Iowa State was picked second because 7 coaches took Iowa State to compete in the Big 12 championship game. But every single one of those 7 coaches had Iowa State losing that Big 12 championship game, which is kind of a statistical improbability for that to occur, but it certainly did. So
they had them losing to K-State, DY?
Well,
I didn't look at it.
That's how their rankings finished because Kansas State had the most votes. But you could see how many times you were picked like first or second. And Iowa State was not picked first ever, but they were picked second 7 times.
That's crazy.
And then I think K-State had 8 votes total. 6 of them were to win the league. 2 were runner-up. Yeah.
So it wasn't to Iowa State. It would probably been like Arizona State or something.
And then
I asked because
Arizona State had 6. I think Arizona State was 4-2. They had 4 to win the league and 2 to finish runner-up, and that was the top of the league. So yeah, I mean, it feels like the Iowa State thing is interesting there. Now I'm somebody, and I don't like people come down on me. Like right now, I would pick Iowa State to win the game in Ireland. I submitted my ballot to Game of Gauchos for the media poll. I had Iowa State 3rd in the Big 12. I had K-State 4th. But it does seem like I feel like a lot more buzz for K-State, Arizona State, and Baylor in terms of who people are picking to win the league, and maybe even Texas Tech.
Where Iowa State kind of surprised me too, and I'll be quite frankly, I think I was asked like what's one team like the media or the public is higher on than you are, and for me it's like Iowa State. Like I know John has them 3rd or 4th. I think I had them 5th. I just don't really understand the assumption that Iowa State's going to be good this year outside of Rocco Beck being back and some of the defense. And Rocco Beck got worse last year with better receivers. He's going to have worse receivers this year. I don't understand the Iowa State thing as much this year. No comment. Okay.
Well, I thought I was waiting for Cole to speak there. Thought he might have good thoughts on Iowa State. I was going to go look at mixed numbers.
I voted him 16th. So, I mean, you don't have to ask me. I mean, that's.
Yeah. Just from a football standpoint, I guess I'm a little surprised about the love for Iowa State this year.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's
yeah.
Feels like Becht was about the same.
Still fine.
Yeah. His quarterback rating was down a little bit.
When you watch, I guess if you look at the numbers, they're fine. I just thought when I watched him, he wasn't as good last year.
Well, no, to your point, DY, I mean, there were multiple instances. He got away with some big mistakes. And he also, like, if you recall the UCF game, didn't he have like 2 pick sixes in that game or 1 pick six and then a near pick six? I don't recall. Like, he got away with some things last year. So he was more mistake prone. He made some misses. He had a hell of a receiving core, obviously. I think he's a good player, but this will be the first time we see him play without Noel and Jaden Higgins. And so it's not like I don't. Chase Soul is their probably go-to wide receiver, transfer from East Carolina. And then at running back, Carson Hansen, frankly, doesn't really scare me. Abu Sama should give me nightmares, but against everybody else, he doesn't really do a lot. So
I don't even know if Sama's going to play much. So
yeah, I mean, so like from a playmaking explosive standpoint, I think their secondary is going to be solid, but they lost a lot on the front 6 of that defense.
And they have 2 first-team All Big 12 DBs, 2 preseason All Big 12 DBs.
I like Cooper. Cooper. I think he's real. The other one, I mean, got toasted by K-State. So
he had some very nice things to say about Jace Brown.
Yeah,
he had some very nice things to say about Jace.
He was on the preseason All Big 12 team, but Jace Brown lit him up. So
he thinks Jace Brown is a pro. So maybe he is. All right, when we come back, I'm going to tell you what I thought was, to me, the most eye-catching comment from Chris Kleiman. That's next.
Looking for tickets for your next event? Tickets for Less is your #1 source. Save big on every purchase when you use promo code KCSN at ticketsforless.com.
I'm BJ Kissel, founder and CEO of KC Sports Network. Emprise Bank has been with us from the beginning. They were our first network partner, and they believed in the vision of what we were building from the start. I can't speak to any other banks or companies and how they operate, but I can tell you from personal experience and based on the growth of the network you're listening to right now, that if you have banking needs, call our friends at Emprise Bank. We've worked with so many great people there over the years, from Vicky and Aggie to Andrea, Lori, Jackie, Deb, and Aaron, and not to mention so many others that not just supported KC Sports Network, but supported our KCSN Foundation as well. But the best thing that I know is that if I have a question or a problem, no matter how dumb the question is, I know who I'm going to call and who I'm going to talk to, and I know that I'm getting an answer from someone that I can trust, and I know that person is there to help us. That's why Emprise Bank has always been and continues to be our partner in Possible, and they can be yours too. You just have to reach out. If you have a banking need, whether it's business or personal, hit me up. I will connect you directly with the same people that have helped us build KCSN. And that's our friends at Emprise Bank.
Folks, there's nothing that beats relaxing on a hot summer day and watching some baseball. And there's no simpler way to get in on the action than by downloading the Pick 6 app from DraftKings. It's crazy simple. Just pick more or less on the stats for 2 or more of your favorite players, and boom, you're in the mix for big cash prizes. And the best part, Pick 6 is available right here in Missouri. Don't miss out on the fun. Don't settle for a smaller payout. Switch to Pick 6, and right now, new customers can get $25 in bonus picks with their first deposit of $5. Here's what you got to do. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use code KCSN. That's code KCSN for new customers to get $25 in bonus picks with their first deposit of $5. Better payouts, bigger wins, only with Pick 6 from DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Void where prohibited. New customers only. Minimum $5 deposit. Bonus picks expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
See if you agree with this, DY, but I thought the the love for George Fitzpatrick was the most eye-catching, certainly in a positive way, thing to me that came out of media day. And that wasn't just Chris Kleiman insinuating that, he may be the best offensive lineman that they had, but, a lot of love from others. And I know, Ryan Davis was the guy that kept coming up when we asked for, hey, who's somebody we're not talking about right now that is going to be a household name by the end of the year. So we can certainly get into him too. But I was very look, tackle, big concern. You've got a new offensive line coach this year. Even though I love Brian LePack, you need to make sure that those transfers get in and are ready to go. Literally not even week 0, right? So the fact that, that I feel like is maybe not being talked about enough. Chris Kleiman even brought up when you asked him, DY, something to the effect of what position groups are you most looking forward to getting going with the battle? He was like, we got to get offensive line going. We got to get corner going, which I think are pretty obvious. But he understands the importance of that. It's great to hear. It's great to hear that George Fitzpatrick is the real deal. They needed one of those tackles to absolutely step up and be the real deal.
Yeah, not a complete surprise to me, because I kind of had the impression that Fitzpatrick had a really good spring and it was kind of took over that starting left tackle job. That's kind of what we had seen even when we were at practices in April. So not a huge shock. Maybe a little the stunner was maybe saying that he is so bona fide he might be the best one on the team, and it's just hammered it down, no question, running away with it. Maybe that's part of the surprise. I think that wasn't an enlightening statement. I think if you combine what everyone said, what we had heard about Ryan Davis was pretty enlightening too on the defensive side. If you want to talk about another guy that generated a lot of hype while we were in Frisco, my main takeaway actually might be, and I know they didn't mean this to do this or to imply this, but it certainly was the case, is both Avery Johnson and Chris Kleiman acknowledging and recognizing that they'll be better off together than maybe what Avery was with Connor Riley as his offensive coordinator. At least when I read between the lines of some of their answers, that's the impression that I got. One of Avery's answers was literally, I think Matt Wells understands me more and can kind of get me into it more. And I think Kleiman, either at the podium or elsewhere, had a quote where he said that Avery will be better off with Matt Wells calling the plays because it's going to be the quarterback coach now as the offensive coordinator rather than otherwise. So to me, they didn't come out and they weren't meaning to drag Connor Riley, and certainly they're all close with him. But I thought it was clear that they felt like they've upgraded off an offensive coordinator, at least in the way that it'll benefit Avery Johnson moving forward.
And the frustrating, Cole, I'll let you go here in a second. I'm sorry. The frustrating part about that is what? We all kind of saw that coming. We sat here and said that last year. I don't know. It's just as frustrating that they went that way last year. Who knows how much of the season that would have actually changed, but definitely could have potentially changed the Houston game, which we just talked about, domino effect that could come from that. But my other question, Cole, is if Connor Riley hadn't gotten the job with the Cowboys, they were just going to roll with the same thing, right? So
Now, I will say this again, because I was going through the media guide last night as a refresher as we start to pull together all the season preview shows that are coming your way. So be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss it. It was a reminder that K-State did set a school record in yards per play last year at 6.57. And they also set a school record in yards per carry at 6.08, shattering the mark by 0.8 yards per carry. The previous high was 5.27 in 2016. By a K-State team. They were 6.08 yards per carry last year. So, look, they did some really good things. I have to add that as a caveat. Obviously, I expressed frustration certain games, nitpicking Connor Riley last year, and my excitement for Matt Wells as the OC, is generated largely because I just, when your quarterback coach is your offensive coordinator, especially a guy with Matt Wells' experience and being an offensive-minded guy, that just makes more sense to me. He's the guy that's talking in the ear to Avery Johnson every play, and now he's the guy that's calling the plays. In fact, I had sent you guys a text, hey, you should ask Avery this when you bring him on about the benefit of having Matt Wells being the quarterback coach, but also the guy now calling the plays. And you guys had already mentioned, we actually just talked to Avery and he brought it up on his own accord. So I think that's definitely a key part of it. Excited to see what that looks like. And then Chris Kleiman brought it up with you guys too on the show when I listened. So he mentioned that and noted it. I think he noted it in multiple instances. So yeah, I think that's a big deal. George Fitzpatrick, tackle. Look, if he can become an all Big 12 type, not even talking first team, all Big 12, but one of the top 3 left tackles, top 4 left tackles in the Big 12, then K-State's in a great spot because you needed one of those guys to lock down one of the tackle spots and be good. And then you have John Pastore and some others that you can figure it out on the right side, but left tackle was the priority. And JB Nelson being brought in from Penn State, could shore up the interior potentially and allow you to slide more guys out to the edge at right tackle. If John Pastore can be healthy, I think he's the guy that mans that spot. But I just feel a lot better about the offensive line hearing the buzz that we are on George Fitzpatrick. And then obviously Ryan Davis, I was just thinking about this, guys, and I went back and listened to 2024 Media Day comments and a recap that we did. But I also thought back to 2023 when we were at Big 12 Media Days, and Austin Romaine was the guy that was being the buzz. And so you can be dismissive about this and be like, oh, we hear this all the time, guys. Like every player in 2023 that we talked to was hyping up Austin Romaine, a true freshman, 2-star linebacker that had no Power 4 offers. And look what he's become. So there is some credibility to when they say these things, you got to take note. Now, I will also say I listened back to 2024 and Keegan Johnson was a guy they were really hyping up. And maybe if he was healthy, it would have been different. But Keegan Johnson, Garrett Oakley, those were some of the guys getting a lot of love. And Garrett Oakley was just banged up last year. But I say all of that, it's easy to be dismissive and they're just hyping some of their own guys up. But I also think you got to give some credibility to that because based on history, you look at Austin Romaine and what he became. These guys see these guys every day in the weight room, working out on the practice field. I think Ryan Davis is going to have a really nice year.
I think folks get dismissive because they only remember the misses rather than the hits. Because they always talk about, oh, they're always too high on this guy or too high on that guy. I think a lot of times if you apply the appropriate perspective is most of the time it comes out true. And I think the errors or the miscommunication along the lines of where they think it doesn't work is when they hype up a guy and he doesn't do it right away. Just like Austin Romaine didn't do it right away. He kind of struggled in 2023 and kind of wore down because he had to play as a true freshman. It doesn't mean it's going to happen right away. Sometimes, especially with the young players, they're talking about a guy that's going to be a heavy contributor or an impact player at some point in his career. They're not maybe talking day one where you're obviously going to have growing pains. And obviously for the ones they miss, like Keegan Johnson and to an extent Garrett Oakley, it's because they were never healthy.
Well, I'm glad you bring that up, DY, because I was going to say, I feel like and we got some of this pushback on the Discord, by the way, patreon.com/3maw if you want to sign up for the Discord. There was some Ryan Davis pushback and people kind of poking fun at that. I always feel like the meme of, which it really is memeified a little bit, Chris Kleiman being too overly effusive with praise for players, goes back to in 2021 calling Will Howard the best backup quarterback in the country, which he was doing early on in the season. And then people saw Will Howard play when he had to come in that year and were kind of like, what is this? He still doesn't seem like he's very good. And so that got pretty widely panned by the fan base. The season was okay, but it wasn't great. But then guess what? The next year, we're all clamoring for Will Howard. And why is Adrian Martinez playing? He still should not have played that Texas game. I don't care what any of you guys say. We're all pining for Will Howard, and he wins the Big 12 championship. So, he was right in some ways, and he winds up being a national champion at Ohio State, right? But it was delayed gratification.
There's examples, too, of where Kleiman's doing it clearly because the kid needs a confidence boost. And in the case of Will Howard, and even early on with Chris Tennant, I think that was obviously what was at play. But in the scenario where we're talking about George Fitzpatrick and Ryan Davis, I don't think we're talking about players desperately in need of a confidence boost.
Yeah, I also think they see things behind the scenes. Like game day, Will Howard was probably different in 2021 than what they were seeing in practice that led to them making those comments. And so they were clearly, they're good talent identifiers. typically as a coaching staff, they find a lot of under the radar types and they develop them.
They got to see healthy Keegan Johnson. We really never did.
Yeah, great point. Yeah, Keegan Johnson, boy, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. That was me.
Yeah, me too. And to be honest, if we're talking about the injury stuff, like we probably need to say, hey, it's injury prone, so it might not materialize. So, and I've kind of learned that lesson myself. So with Joe Jackson, who's been injured quite a bit for a guy that hasn't played a lot, I'm a little bit more wait and see on him than other people. Garrett Oakley, I'm a little bit more wait and see on him than other people. John Pastore, I'm a little wait and see on him than other people. Those are three guys that have been hurt quite a bit and haven't even played a lot of college football.
Yeah, well, John, I know you got to run, John.
Real quick, yeah, I was going to say, guys, I'll let you carry this conversation. I got to go. So take care. Thank you, everybody. I'll see you soon.
Boy, DY, you're gonna love my over-unders because some of the names you're rattling off there. I started pulling together the outline for the offensive over and unders that you guys like to poke fun at. I think my numbers are going to be relatively reasonable. Nick, do we need to throw one more break here, or are we good? Just let me know, because DY, I wanted to talk to you about corner real quick as well, and talk to the folks who are listening. So yeah, we'll throw to one more break, and then we'll talk a little bit K-State defense and things we heard from Big 12 Media Days when we come back.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network.
All right, DY. So Chris Kleiman obviously when you talked to him about position groups that, were maybe in question or they needed answered, as they start into fall camp here in the next couple of weeks, the groups that he brought up were offensive line and then also corner, and needing shored up. And I want your thoughts on this, because when I look at the cornerback room, obviously there's no experience. Zayshawn Rich has the most experience. Justice James, obviously, as well, though he's not the bona fide, most talented guy in that room. Zayshawn Rich is a guy that we know is extremely talented. He's going to be a true sophomore this year. We saw him in the Rate Bowl. We saw him sporadically in other games, and including late down the stretch at Colorado, where he made a big play as well. When I look at the cornerback room, to me, it feels like it could be one of Chris Kleiman's most talented cornerback groups that he's had at Kansas State. It's just so raw in terms of experience. How would you kind of assess the talent that's in that room and the ceiling comparatively to what Kleiman and staff have had during their time here?
There's a world where they may have a better cornerback room this year than they did last. I think that exists, but is it likely? Probably not, because of that inexperience that you've referred to and what that can all obviously culminate in, which is some maybe hair-pulling mistakes at times, especially early in the season, which I kind of foresee with this group. Fortunately, you're playing Iowa State, who's going to be breaking in new wide receivers, so they could be going through some growing pains of their own, maybe growing pain versus growing pain. Kleiman did refer to the offensive line and the cornerbacks as maybe something that needs to be shored up or attacked or addressed first and foremost when they convene for training camp. For me, offensive line, it wasn't really that he's concerned about it or doesn't think they have the guys and need to develop it. It almost seemed that they have the guys. They just need to configure how they're going to play with that group, who's going to line up where, who's maybe going to be that starting right tackle. At corner, I think it is about development, though. I think that is the room that you need to go in and start really pushing guys to get over that next hump. Jaden Rowe, an athletic freak that'll remind people of Julius Brents from a physical standpoint when you talk about the combination of size and speed. But he hasn't played a lot of college football, couldn't see the field at Oklahoma, has kind of dealt with injuries himself too that caused that. Marion Fortenberry, really good young player, started 8 games as a true freshman in South Alabama. New system, how's that go? How's he transfer to the Big 12 right away? We'll see. Zayshawn Rich had a really good Rate Bowl, but if people remember, it didn't start out really good, right? He took some lumps early in that game against Rutgers and then just got remarkably better as that game went along. I think that's probably how his 2025 season will go. He'll have some lumps early, but get remarkably better as the season goes along. Donovan McIntosh, he might be the biggest freak in the room. He's one of the 4 Kansas State players in the 23 miles per hour club, and he's 6'2", 6'3", a really long guy. So another one with maybe that Julius Brent's physical makeup. So you got the dudes capable of doing it, but it's going to be up to Van Malone and Chris Kleiman and Joe Klannerman of getting a couple of those guys at least early up to speed and fast, because you don't have a whole lot of time to ease into this season. Like John said, you don't play week 1. You got to be ready week 0, a week earlier than usual. And you have 4 dudes who have the upside to be, quite honestly, stars in college football, but we don't really have an idea of how close they are to that at this point.
If you were to predict the top 2 or the 2 starting corners that take the field against Iowa State as we sit here today, knowing practice hasn't even started, who would be the 2 based off the intel and what you've heard from the staff?
Yeah, it's tough. I actually get some indecision and back, so I don't even know if anyone's leaning one way or the other right now. A lot of the stuff that I write on our site, I feel like I have a good idea, even in positions that they don't have a returning starter, of who's going to be that next guy here in the 2025 season. At corner, it just still seems like a free for all. I've even had someone tell me that they wouldn't even eliminate Justice James from the consideration at this point. So I don't even think behind the scenes that there's like a clear favorite or 2 favorites even. If I had to guess, I would say Jaden Rowe. It seems like maybe he gets talked about a little bit more than other people in that room, the other corners in that room. So I would lean towards Jaden Rowe. And I just want to say Zayshawn Rich at this point, because I think there's a little bit more known commodity with him, even though he's played very little, than Donovan McIntosh, who Rowe played more than Donovan McIntosh last year. So you have that facts, that evidence in hand almost. And then Fortenberry, who I was excited about to pick up. I'm not saying it won't work. I think it will work. And I'm not trying to get people worried about him, but the chatter about him has just been very light at this point.
Yeah, I was going to say, based off the minimal chatter on Amarian Fortenberry at this point, who again I think is a really solid pickup, and I think he'll be a contributor at some point. Yeah. I think he'll be a solid contributor this season at some point, and they'll rely on him. But I would guess at the top 3 right now, and I should probably say top 4, because you're right, Justice James, based off experience alone, like he's the most experienced guy in that room, and when that's a concern, he'll probably see some substance.
To be honest, and I know people might roll their eyes or might not even like it, but from a standpoint of how important that game is, and knowing who else is in the cornerback room, and the mistakes that could be made early in the season, but knowing that you have Iowa State across the sideline from you in week 0, it could make some sense to maybe start Justice James in an Iowa State game.
They very well could do it, because what was the biggest downfall last year? Yeah, like a lack of communication in the secondary impacted K-State last year, assignment errors, etc. And when you look at this secondary, the only guy that's really got returning starting experience as far as in this program is VJ Payne. And then Gunnar Maldonado is a very experienced player, new to the system. I would trust him to pick things up. But then you got Quay Moss, transfer from West Georgia, coming in that they're very high on. But again, it's just a different level. And I'm talking safeties there. But, like if you got 4 guys that are, Colby McAllister, who sounds like, he's going to be right. He's going to be right up against that kickoff for like, how ready is he? It sounded like I gathered based off what Chris Kleiman was saying that, he'd probably be able to play in that game, but how much practice time will he have had at that point? Like what rust will be there given the injury that he had late last year? Same thing for Gunnar Maldonado, frankly. Let it go. That is a concern. Like 2 of your better safeties, 2 of your more experienced safeties are guys coming off serious injuries heading into this season. And so, I wouldn't be surprised if they put Justice James out there just to have another experienced player to be on the field in that Iowa State game. But I do think at some point this next season, like it's going to be Jaden Rose, Zayshawn Rich, and maybe Donovan McIntosh that eventually take over at corner just from a raw talent perspective. Because if they put it all together, I mean, DY, you mentioned it, Donovan McIntosh is 6'3" and runs 23 miles per hour and was a pretty good recruit coming out of high school in the 2023 class with Avery Johnson and those guys, and was a really nice pickup. He's heading into year 3 in the program. You already talked about Rich. Jaden Rowe was a 4-star going into OU. He's 6'2", almost 220 pounds, and runs over 22 miles per hour. So the thing that impacted him the most is injuries at Oklahoma and why he didn't see the field, which you mentioned the Julius Brents comparisons. Again, Julius Brents came to K-State banged up throughout his career at Iowa. I say banged up. He had a serious injury at Iowa and didn't see the field. So, those guys are physical freaks that K-State has in the secondary, which is why I say the ceiling for this group might be higher than a lot of other Chris Kleiman cornerback groups, but there could be some bumps based off the lack of experience. So I just wanted to pick your mind on that.
I mean, the only one where I would maybe argue would be when they had Echo Boydo and Julius Brents together. I mean, that was quite the tandem.
Well, yeah, no, and I mean, that's what I would be bumping it up against, because then you had Jacob Parrish coming in the Big 12 championship game behind him as a true freshman, right? I think he was a true freshman that year. Is that right?
Keaton Garber played on defense for the first time in that game.
Yeah, but if you think about Jacob Parrish, a 3rd-round pick, Julius Brents, a 2nd-round pick, and then Echo Boydo got picked up by the Chiefs and is going around a couple NFL teams right now, practice squad, etc. So there was some talent. Look, K-State, we thought K-State secondary could be one of the best in the Big 12, if not the best last year. And they didn't play like it, unfortunately. A lot of mistakes that were made. But you still had a 3rd-round pick in Parrish and a 5th-round pick in Marquise Siegel that flashed at the NFL Combine. So you're replacing those guys, and it's just going to be really fascinating to watch what they look like, especially the first few weeks. That's why it might be good for us to get Joe Klanderman on the show again to talk about that group like we had him on last summer if we can, because I'd love to hear his thoughts on some of the guys they've got in terms of the talent in the secondary and what they're seeing there. DY, anything we didn't hit on from Media Day that stood out or raised your eyebrows?
No, I mean, like I said, the one that was most startling is the word was to me was basically the admission and the acknowledgement that Avery will be better with Matt Wells than maybe what we saw last year. And I thought that was just a powerful statement, because, I mean, they both had to navigate and maneuver around not disrespecting Connor Riley while saying that. And I know that they didn't want to do that, but the fact that they were still thought it was that necessary to point out, I just thought was strong, quite frankly.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it certainly feels like there's just a more comfortability factor between Avery and Matt Wells. Now we're going to see it on game day, because that's ultimately what matters. But just what this offense looks like with Matt Wells leading it, it's going to be really interesting to watch, because K-State has been, a power rushing attack that DY was looking at it for the over-under stuff that we're going to do. But 4 consecutive seasons, K-State's had somebody go over 1,000 yards. In fact, the fewest rushing yards by K-State's leading rusher since 2021 is over 1,200. And so that was DJ Giddens in 2023, 1,226 yards. So what's the rushing attack look like this year versus the passing game? Because K-State ran for 2,800 yards last year on the ground. They typically run for 2,500 plus on Connor Riley. They don't have that bell cow in DJ Giddens like they had the last couple of years. And so what's the rush versus pass look like?
Yeah, I've said this. I think there's a real scenario where Kansas State doesn't have a 1,000-yard rusher this year.
Which, look, I'll just tell you, DY, when we get into it on the over-under, so you can already give this some thought. I put Dylan Edwards over-under rushing yards at 800. He had 526 last year.
All right.
And I put Joe Jackson I put Joe Jackson at 600, I think, maybe right around there. So then I started looking at it, and then I had Avery, he had 605 yards last year. I don't know how much more he's going to run, et cetera. But
I could see them all around 750 or so, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I think or less. in the case of Edwards and Jackson, because I can actually see Antonio Martin going over 500. I think he's going to play a little bit more than people realize, because I think they're going to need him, because I like Joe Jackson. I've never been down on the talent of Joe Jackson, but the durability is like, you got to prove it to me a little bit before I kind of anoint you as the next guy, so to speak. So I think they're going to need Antonio Martin. Just because, I mean, Dylan Edwards missed a game last year too because of injury, and 2 others where he played very little because of injury. He had 2 games where he had less than 4 touches, and another game where he didn't even dress out because of injury. So when you take that into account, Jackson's durability, I could see at least 2 games where Antonio Martin leads the team in carries. Like, I think that's going to happen, and I think people need to realize that that's going to be the case at some point too. I think there's another world, and I'm probably getting into some of the content I'm going to put on my site in the lead up to the week 0 game against Iowa State and Ireland. But I think there's a world where Avery Johnson is your leading rusher, because I think he's going to be more decisive with the ball when he needs to run and when he doesn't. And I think if he's healthy, because he wasn't healthy last year and still ran 605 yards, because he got banged up in that Colorado game and he was never the same after that. And obviously, so I think if that doesn't happen, and it still could, I realize that, but if that doesn't happen, I mean, I think Avery Johnson could push for 1,000 rushing yards this year.
Yeah. But by the way, DY, was that the first time that Avery's publicly acknowledged the Colorado injury in terms of details? Like, he did it with you guys where he said he was getting shot up every game for like a month after.
Yeah. That amount of detail, I think, was the first time going public. But I think even after the season, like around the bowl game, I think they all said he's been hurt the whole time. But in terms of the detail, saying I got shot up for a month after and stuff like that, probably things that Kansas State wish he wouldn't have shared. Yeah, I don't know that he's ever went into that great of detail either. But because he still ran for 600 yards, still had some good rushing numbers even after that game. But you could tell, like, he was shying away from maybe opportunities that were in front of him just because of not wanting to risk it. So even eliminating some bad sacks too that went against his rushing yardage number. And I think his rushing yardage is going to probably be one of the more, at least numbers wise, different things about him, because if he eliminates the bad sacks and is healthy enough to take the opportunities that are there, he probably would have flirted with 900 last year.
Yeah. Absolutely. And look, we knew he was really banged up after that Colorado game and some of the details around the injury. But I will also just say, like, and this is what I'll be interested to watch Avery this year, DY, is there were instances even before he got injured against Colorado. Like, I think back to the BYU game and a couple of others where he just could, if his instincts he could just take off and run and he would have had 20 yards, like right up the middle, untouched, and then, so I think there were times where it felt like Avery was trying to prove to the world that he could be a pocket passer. And we can talk more about this in our offensive preview that we do before the season. But, this year, will he play a little bit more free and relaxed as he's seeing the field better and just let his instincts take over and run sometimes when the field is wide open? So that will definitely impact the rushing numbers for him as well. So hearing you say that, I might make a slight adjustment to the over-unders I pulled together for Avery's rushing yards.
Well, you don't have to. That might be just where I differ from everyone else, because something to also keep in mind is, like, I don't know if Dylan Edwards is really going to be the running back with the most rushing yards, because I do think they're going to use him in a more diverse way, a less predictable way, like an all-purpose back rather than a between the tackles running back. I think you'll see him split up wide perhaps just as much as he's in the backfield. I think that there's a world where that's going to be the case. So, and then I think there's a world where you're going to be throwing the ball to Will Ancio. You're going to be throwing the ball to Braden Lofton. You're going to be throwing the ball to Garrett Oakley. I think you're going to be throwing the ball to Lincoln Cure. And you still have what Chris Kleiman pointed out is the best wide receiver room he's had since he's been in Manhattan, which I'm not going to go that far yet, even though the bar isn't necessarily that high, but because I think I'm going to play the skepticism game a little bit with Jaron Bradley too, just because he hasn't done a whole lot since that one explosive year at Texas Tech. But I think we know what we're getting in Chase Brown, and I think Jerron Tibbs is the real deal. And just that alone makes them better than the receiver unit last year. So does that chew into the running backs in the running game, Avery Johnson in the running game, when you have a more reliable pass catching options, as long as everyone stays healthy?
Yep. Well, we'll save some of that for the offensive preview and defensive preview and all of the content that's coming your way. So again, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Tell your friends about the show. We're going to have a ton of content coming your way over the next 4 to 5 weeks as we head into football season. This is the fun time of year that we're now getting into as we start to do all of our in-depth season preview shows, schedule breakdowns, etc. So be sure to subscribe on KCSN on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever you take in the show. You can also go to shopkcsn.com and check out some of our new 3 Mall merchandise that John's mentioned before on the show. I've actually been wearing the hoodie. If you go to shopkcsn.com, I got to get DY his mug and John their mug from over there, and then also some 3 Mall apparel that I've got for those guys. So be sure to check it out if you're interested in some 3 Mall merch. For John, for DY, and Nick Springer behind the scenes producing the show, appreciate you all for listening, and we'll talk to you again soon about Kansas State football.